A federal court just quietly changed 6 gun laws in one ruling, and almost nobody's talking about it yet. If you own a firearm, carry one, or even just store one at home, this affects you directly, and the clock is already ticking. Quick question before we go any further. Are you subscribed to this channel? Because what I'm about to walk you through could be the difference between staying legal and accidentally becoming a felon. Hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, pause for 2 seconds and do it. I'll wait. Good. Now let's get into this. So here's what just happened. A federal appeals court handed down a ruling that touched on 6 separate areas of gun law in a single decision. Not 1, not 2, 6. And most mainstream news outlets buried it or skipped it entirely. That means millions of gun owners across the country are walking around right now completely unaware that the rules may have just changed for them. Now, I want to be clear about something right up front. The specifics of how this ruling applies to you depend heavily on which federal circuit you live in. The United States is divided into federal court circuits, and a ruling from one circuit is binding in that circuit, but not automatically everywhere else. Think of it like different managers in different regions of the same company. Same company, but different rules in different offices. So what I'm going to do is walk you through each of the 6 areas this ruling touched, explain what changed, what it means in plain language, and what you need to pay attention to. Let's start with the first change, and honestly, this one surprised me the most. The first area involves the standard courts now use to judge whether a gun law is constitutional. For a long time, courts used a balancing test. They weighed the government's interest against your Second Amendment rights. But after the Supreme Court's Bruen decision in 2022, courts are now required to use what's called a text, history, and tradition test. What that means, in simple terms, is this. If a gun law doesn't have a historical equivalent going back to the founding era of America, it may not be constitutional anymore. This recent ruling doubled down on that standard and applied it in ways that courts in the circuit hadn't done before. That matters because laws that have been on the books for decades are now being challenged and sometimes thrown out under this new framework. The second area is about who can be prohibited from owning a firearm. This is a big one. Federal law has a list of people who are banned from possessing guns. Felons, domestic abusers, people involuntarily committed to mental institutions, and others. But this ruling raised serious questions about whether some of those prohibitions can survive the new historical test. Here's a hypothetical example to explain this. Imagine someone who was convicted of a nonviolent felony 20 years ago, something like tax fraud or a drug possession charge. Under the old framework, they're banned for life, full stop. Under the new framework, a court has to ask whether there's a historical tradition of disarming people for that specific type of offense. In some cases, the answer coming back from courts is no. That doesn't mean violent criminals get their guns back, but it does mean the edges of who is prohibited are being redrawn in real time. The third change involves the process states use to issue carry permits. Some states require applicants to show what's called good cause, or proper cause, before they'll issue a carry permit. Basically, you had to prove to the government that you had a specific reason to need a gun in public. The Bruen decision already knocked this down in principle. But this new ruling strengthened that and applied it to specific permit requirements in this circuit that were still clinging to the old standard. If you live in a state that still has discretionary permitting, meaning officials get to decide whether your reason for wanting a permit is good enough, that system is now under serious legal pressure. If you're finding this breakdown helpful, I want you to know that my next video is going to cover the exact phrases you should and should not say when a law enforcement officer asks you if you're carrying. It's one of the most practical things I've put together. Subscribe right now so you don't miss it when it drops. Now let's move to the fourth area this ruling touched, because this is where it gets really interesting for everyday gun owners. The fourth change is about firearm accessories and modifications. Specifically, this ruling weighed in on how courts should evaluate laws that restrict certain features on firearms. Things like magazine capacity limits, suppressor regulations, and restrictions on pistol braces. The court applied the historical tradition test here and found that several modern restrictions have no clear historical analog from the founding era. That doesn't automatically wipe those laws off the books everywhere, but it creates a legal roadmap that other courts and future challenges are going to follow. If you own any of the items I just mentioned, you need to pay attention to what happens next in your state and circuit, because the legal ground under those restrictions is shifting. The fifth area involves what's called sensitive places. Even after Bruen confirmed a broad right to carry, the Supreme Court made clear that states can still ban guns in certain sensitive locations. Schools, government buildings, courthouses, but states have been pushing that exception pretty hard, trying to declare huge swaths of public space as sensitive. New York, for example, tried to ban guns in Times Square, on public transit, in most private businesses, and in a long list of other places. Courts are now slapping back on those overreaches. This ruling added another data point to that trend. holding that states cannot use the sensitive places exception to effectively nullify the right to carry in public. For you as a gun owner, this means carry rights in public spaces are getting stronger, not weaker, in this circuit. Now, quick legal note before we go further. Everything I'm sharing here is educational information, not legal advice. Gun laws are complicated, they vary by state, and your specific situation may have factors I can't account for in a general video. Always consult a licensed attorney if you have specific questions about your rights and your circumstances. Okay, back to it. The sixth and final area this ruling touched is one that most people haven't even heard of, and that's exactly why it matters. It involves the standard of scrutiny applied to laws that affect people who are not prohibited persons, but who are in legally ambiguous situations. Think about this scenario. Someone has a restraining order against them that was issued without a full hearing. They were never convicted of anything. They were never given a real chance to contest the order in court. But under current federal law, that restraining order can strip them of their gun rights. This ruling looked hard at whether that process passes constitutional muster. The court found that the lack of meaningful due process in some of these proceedings raises serious Second Amendment concerns. This one is still being fought out in courts across the country, but it's moving fast. Here's what you need to understand about all 6 of these changes together. They don't exist in isolation. They're part of a much larger legal wave that started with Bruen in 2022 and is still building. Courts at every level are being forced to go back and re-examine gun laws that haven't been seriously challenged in years, sometimes decades. Some of those laws are going to survive, some aren't. And the ones that don't survive are going to fall in ways that actually expand your rights, not shrink them. But here's the mistake most gun owners make. They hear that a court ruling went in a pro-gun direction and they assume it automatically applies everywhere and covers everything. It doesn't. A ruling in the Ninth Circuit doesn't instantly change the law in the Fifth Circuit. A ruling about carry permits doesn't tell you anything about what happened. In a traffic stop. You still need to know the specific laws in your specific state. You still need to understand what is and isn't legal where you live. That's what this channel is here to help you with. Hey, quick note. Right now, the majority of people watching this video are not subscribed. That means they're going to miss the follow-up content I'm already building around exactly these 6 areas. Don't let that be you. Join the tens of thousands of gun owners who use this channel to stay ahead of changes like this. Hit subscribe right now. It costs you nothing, and it could save you everything. Now let me bring this all together for you. 6 gun law areas just shifted in a single federal court ruling. The standard for judging gun laws has changed. The list of prohibited persons is being re-examined. Discretionary carry permits are under serious legal attack. Accessory and modification restrictions are being challenged. The sensitive places exception is being reined in, and due process protections for people facing restraining orders are being scrutinized. None of this means you can ignore the laws in your state right now. None of this means you should change your behavior based on a court ruling before that ruling is finalized and applies to you. What it means is that the legal landscape is moving, and if you're not paying attention, you could find yourself either violating a law that still applies to you or giving up a right that has actually been restored. This is exactly the kind of update that gets buried. It doesn't make front page news, it doesn't trend on social media, but it matters more to your daily life as a gun owner than almost anything else you're going to see in your feed today. Before I close out, I want to leave you with one more thing to think about. These rulings are coming faster now. The courts have a backlog of Second Amendment cases that have been building since Bruen, and they're working through them. That means over the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to see more of these changes, not fewer. Some will go in directions you like, some may not. The only way to stay ahead of it is to stay informed. Subscribe to this channel right now if you haven't already. I'm going to keep tracking every major ruling that affects your rights as a gun owner, and I'm going to break it down in plain language every single time. No legalese, no spin, just the facts you need to know. And if you found this video valuable, share it with one gun owner you know who isn't keeping up with these changes. You might be doing them the biggest favor of their year. Remember, knowing the law is the first step to following it. Stay legal, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.